This lecture was recorded on January the 21st, 2010. It has been edited for this presentation. In journalism, but you have to create for yourself a new mindset. You have to start thinking a little differently. First of all, your writing has a purpose, and you're not the purpose. Your writing's purpose is to inform somebody else, to tell somebody else something they don't know, but they want to know. So you got to always keep that in mind. Your purpose is to inform. Occasionally your purpose is to entertain, occasionally it is to persuade, but for the most part, particularly here in this class, your purpose is to inform. Secondly, you need to learn how to separate yourself from the information that you are presenting. It's just information. It's just out there. It's not you. You don't have anything to do with it, except you're getting it and you're putting it into a form that is palatable for an audience, and you're passing it on. But the information is not you. You also have to separate yourself from your writing. You really have to objectify your writing. Now, last week I talked about modesty. That is, a writer getting behind the writing, not ever coming out front. That's why we most of the time use third person in our writing. We stay at arm's length from the writing. We try to write in ways that do not reveal how we feel about the information. And it's called objectivity, and it's called fairness and balance and all of that. But I like the term modesty. Journalists have a real adherence for the truth. They're really trying to be accurate, trying to seek the truth, and it's not a philosophical discussion. They're trying to relate things that they find out, things that they see, as best they can. Whether or not one can actually find truth in the philosopher's sense is really not of concern to the journalist who's doing daily journalism. What we are trying to do is something far more practical and simply trying to relate an accurate picture of our world, or a part of our world, to an audience who wasn't there. And maybe others will agree with that picture. That's what we hope. Maybe they won't, because people have differing points of view. But journalist tries to accurately portray the part of the world that he or she sees to an audience. So, how do you do all this? First thing you do, if you're really going to improve your writing, is you read. Now, you ought to read anything, anywhere, anytime. Advertisements on buses, For this class, what you ought to get into the habit of doing is reading news stories. Not opinion pieces, news stories. Go to a good news website, whichever one you want. Fox News, MSNBC, New York Times, any of them. Every morning or whenever you can do it, read 2 or 3 good news stories. That's step number 1. Step number 2, analyze those stories. Figure out how the reporter did it. Figure out what the structure that the reporter is using. Think about the sources of information that the reporter had for this story. And often those sources you will find are right there in the story. They should be, because that's one of the things we do as journalists. Read, analyze, and then emulate. We're not asking you to do anything new. We're not asking you to create anything new. We are simply asking you to learn the form. And I remember this very well. In my first news writing course, I looked at a news story that had been written by a professional. I had some information. I wrote my story exactly like the news story I was reading. I didn't copy it, I just sort of paragraph by paragraph. I said, okay, the writer's doing this here, then I'll do that. In the first paragraph, it's fairly short. Lead paragraph, most important stuff, one sentence, that's what I'm going to do. Second paragraph, a little bit more information, that's what I'm going to do. Third paragraph, a direct quote. I've got a direct quote, I'm going to put it right there. And it was just an emulation. By the time I finished that news story, and I looked at the one that was done by a professional, I looked at the one I'd done, I thought, yeah, I can do this. So, read, analyze, emulate. What we ask you to do is learn the forms, not create the forms. Pay attention to your lab instructor. Pay attention to your verbs. If there is one thing I can tell you right now, tonight, that will improve your writing immediately, it is use better verbs. Use active, descriptive verbs. Forget about adjectives, forget about adverbs. Don't forget about nouns, they're necessary. But the verbs, they're the ones. They're the ones. You start using better verbs, your writing will be better. Verbs, despite what your English books say, verbs describe. I say this to groups every once in a while, particularly high school students. They don't believe me because they're in love with adjectives. Accuracy, clarity, precision, kill your children. Verbs. Pay attention to your verbs. The first sentence you write after you leave this class, look at the verb. If it is passive voice, if it is a linking verb, tell yourself, I have work to do.